Hello, so in this tutorial we are going to show you how to make a waffle structure out of some basic geometry. So in the scene I've just created something pretty basic. If I select it, it essentially just started off as a box, some basic extrusions, mesh smooth, and then I added an edit poly to finish it off. So some basic geometry here, but we want to make this into something that we can fabricate, either using a laser cutter or a mill. And we're going to do that by using the Waffle parameters now in Parah 3D. So the first thing I'll need to do is create a grid system, and that'll be working in two directions. One will be working in this direction, the other will be working in the other direction at 90 degrees, and that will be the basic parameters for our waffle structure. So I'll go into the right view, and then go to create, and then I'll go to the helpers tab. So I'm just going to create two grids. It doesn't matter the size or the location in this view. It'll matter once we go into the top and set it. So we'll take this. One important thing to note is that it's going to need to intersect the object that you are contouring slightly. So you can adjust this later, but right now this should be fine. So I'm just going to hold Shift and then drag this grid out to the other side. So and I'll just keep that as a copy. So that'll define one contour system. Now I'll go into my front view by just tapping F, go back to my grid, add another grid, back into my top view, W to move. Again, I'll make sure that this overlaps slightly. Hold Shift, and then I'll drag this out. Make that as a copy as well. And as you can see, all four grids are now overlapping, and then I'll eventually link this grid A to B, and then this grid C to grid D. So we have everything we need to get into Parah. So I will select my initial geometry, and I will go up to Parah. We are going to create, or we want to assign a controller. So I'll hit create. Give it a second while it's loading. The first thing I like to do is I like to keep my file pretty organized, so when I get a lot of nodes in my scene, I can keep track of everything. So I'll just name this OG for original geometry. As you can see, I have my my node here. Okay, so the next thing I'll need to do is create contours, which is going to be keyed in by those grids that we made. So I will go to the contour generator. And again, everything moves in Parah. Everything moves from right to left. So we'll keep the original geometry to the right of the contour, and then I'll just delete all this. So I know that this is contour 1, and we'll need 2. So I'll just create those now. So I'll go to the second contour generator, relabel this contour 2. So we're just setting up the framework. And again, when working in Parah, it's important to note that you're always going to move from the right to the left. So all the new nodes or controllers that we set up are going to be shifting to the left. So that's good as you are beginning to familiarize yourself with Parah 3D. Okay, in order for us to use the contour functionality, we're going to need two separate items. So we're going to need a Parah node, which is going to relate back to the original geometry, which we have here. So you can see Parah is always going to relate back to Parah. And then also we're going to need a transform, which is essentially going to be linked to our grids. So I will quickly add the geometry to each of my contours. Okay, so now I'm going to create a now I'll need a link controller, so I'll drag that out onto the canvas. This is going to refer to grid A, like I mentioned before. And since I know it's going to be hooked up to grid B, I'll just copy and then paste it, and then rename that grid B. Alright, let me just set this. Okay, so now we have the option set for grid A, grid B. We're going to need a linear controller for those to link up to. So we're going to type in linear controller. Okay. Okay, so now we have a linear controller. I will rename it quickly, and then we'll set the parameters within the linear controller. So this is going to be a one-dimensional array, so we can take off 3D and 2D. And this is also going to be a matrix, so we can set that. You could also just connect that directly to the transform node, and it would adjust. It would adjust it would adjust the type as well. So. Okay, so we'll expand the options here. As you see, we have two things to link up. So we can put A in our first, and then we can take our B grid and put that in. So now we have everything set up, and we need to set the geometry. Okay, so when we open up the options of our grid A, we're going to need to make this an external link because it's within the scene itself. So you can see that all these options here are grayed out. So basically what we need to do is pick an object. So with the A grid selected, I will pick an object, select it. We'll need to find the grid within the track view, and then expand the options. And we're interested in the transform functionality within the grid because we need to create the contour set, so we're looking at the position, rotation, and scale. And we'll need to repeat this for grid B. So again, we're going to make it an external link. We're going to pick an option. We're going to pick an object, select the second grid within the scene, select the grid, expand the options, select transform, and then select OK. Okay, so we're all set up. So the last thing we're going to need to do in order to create the contours is select the contour itself and then define the amount of contours we want. So I'll select 15 and then just hit enter, and as you can see within the scene it's updated. So essentially we need to create the second set of contours moving in the other direction. Okay, in order to sort of speed up the process, we can quickly double click on our linear controller, and that basically just closes. If I were to double click again, it would expand the options. So everything is enclosed within this node here, and I can just copy and then paste and then reset the options. So everything within this is still linked to A and B, but I'll need to update those to C and D. So I'll go through quickly and rename those C and D. I can expand these. And we'll quickly organize this. So we're going to keep this as an external link. As you can see here, it's already linked to a grid, so we're going to need to update that. So if I select grid C, I'll select, this is the pick an object. We'll select grid C, expand the options again, transform, OK, and then repeat the option with repeat these steps. Sorry, with the D grid. So we'll select pick an object, select the grid within the scene, expand the options, transform, OK. Okay, so this is going to come back into contour 2, and then we're going to select contour 2. Set the number to 15 because that's what we set in our first contour, and then generate contours now. All right. So as you can see, we have two contours working in both directions. Also, something quick to note, and this is a problem you'll run into if you don't select this option. When you select your contour, make sure you hit close all contours. It won't make a shell or add thickness if you don't have this option closed, so or selected. So you will just hit close all contours. Alright, so we will select both contours. I'm actually going to reduce this number for the sake of the video to speed it up slightly. I'll just reduce this number to 10. Again, when you're doing it on your own and you have a little bit more time, you can increase this number. And then I'll generate the contours again. So everything essentially looks the same, except for now we are we've sort of made sure that all the contours are now closed, and we're not going to have any problems when we add thickness to these contours using the shell command. All right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to need to do is add thickness to these contours. Everything is set up within the scene, and we'll need to open Parah, and then we'll open a parametric array. Again, we'll slide this over to the left, select parametric array, and then we're going to make this a reference. Take the contour and then select it, or then connect it to our Parah. So this is going to end up adding our thickness to our waffle structure. So I'm just going to name it shell, because that's the modifier we're going to add to it. So so I'll know. So we will select the first member in the array, and then go to the modify tab. Go to the modifier list, and then add a shell. Here we'll add the thickness. I'll keep this at the default 5 centimeters and 5 centimeters. With the shell selected, I'll then reload the options. This is asking me if I want to access the vertices. I'll select no. So this is so now we've created a thickness using the contours. To quickly check to make sure if this is done correctly, I'm just going to open this up so we can see all the options. What we'll need to do is select the shell, and then select the Parah members, and then just quickly isolate them. So, as you can see in this small portion of screen I have left, it looks like it's done its job. Okay, so and all I did was isolate the selection. So I can turn that back off, close the shell, and then repeat the process, because we need to essentially create the other set of ribs moving perpendicular to our first set of ribs. So we'll go back up to Parah, parametric array, and I'll label this shell 2. This will also be a reference. We're going to select that, and then connect into our contour. Select the first member in the array, go back to the Modify tab, add a shell, keep the numbers default, and then reload. We don't want to access the vertices, so we'll select no. We'll select the shell 2 node, select the objects within that node, and then quickly isolate them just to make sure that everything looks good, and it does. Okay, so we can disable the that option, and now we're ready to make our waffle structure. Alright, so the first step in making our waffle structure, we'll go up to Parah, and then we'll need to go to compound. So there's a few settings within the compound that we need to set before we get started. The first thing we're going to need to do is set Parah. It's going to be a mesh, and then we want to use a waffle structure. It's saying that we need to choose option 3, so we'll go back up to option 3, set that, because we want the items of A to interact with all the items of B and vice versa. So since we have our shells here, and we're moving from left to right, we can simply connect these, A to A, B to B, and then we can generate our compound objects. So we'll give a second to update. All right, looks like it's set. So just again to make sure, we're going to select the members, quickly isolate them, and you can see that we've got our notches set. So everything looks good in this set. So I will disable this, and then we'll just need to reset the we're just going to repeat the option. So we'll go back, add another compound, again set the options to Parah. We know we need to use option 3, make it a mesh, and then we're going to use a waffle structure. So those are all the settings that we're going to need. The only difference is now you're going to set A with B, and then B with A. So as you can see here, we went from A to A and B to B, and now we're going to go from A to B and B to A. All right, so that's the only thing, the only sort of difference between our two sets. So we can select this and generate the compound objects. Again, we'll select both both of our compounds. Select the pair members, quickly isolate it. All right, and then we can check the scene. And everything looks pretty good. We should probably just look at one system just to make sure that the notches are working how we expect them to. So it actually looks pretty good. This would actually slide up just like that. So you can see here that it's about 50% working through system A and about 50% working through system B. So these should lock up really nice and get you a super nice waffle structure. So one last important thing to note, that if you notice here that every rib is only intersecting with its an opposing rib once. So if you have a system, let's just say you had a sphere and you tried to create a waffle slab in a sphere, where you would get a member intersecting another member more than once, the waffle slab command would not work, as it's you'd have to actually cut it when you were sort of building it physically, and Parah doesn't currently support that. So what that means is if you could imagine this rib here continuing, and then also this rib continuing, the point of intersection at the bottom where it would intersect the second time would be sort of an impossible scenario to build unless you were sort of building with a very flexible material. The only way to do that would actually be create a slit in the rib and build it in two parts. So just something to note as you are going through and exploring with the compound, using our waffle using our waffle structure within Parah 3D. Also, the second note before we finish this this tutorial. Both of these notches were working correctly. Sometimes you might run into some issues where you might get notches on the same side, so both coming from the bottom or both coming from the top. You can quickly adjust that by hitting invert waffle structure on one of your compound nodes, and that should fix it. Okay, in the we will add another set of tutorials that deal with fabrication. So if we wanted to laser cut these, the next step would be to lay these geometries flat and then label them in a way that's sort of clear and coherent, so when we end up with a pile of ribs when we're done with the laser cutter or the mill, that we know what parts correspond with the opposite ribs. So we'll cover that in another tutorial, but for now, this is the waffle structure within Parah 3D. Thanks again for watching.